Experienced designers can feel a lot of pressure to deliver bigger and grander experiences. And who doesn't love a grand experience that wows us? At the same time, when we only focus on the wow, we miss more opportunities to create experiences that connect, impress, and just generally make people's lives better. That's why I am writing the book, The Unwow, your framework for experience designs of all kinds. The Unwow explores how we can focus on everyday experiences to deliver greater impact and value to our design audiences. The Unwow believes in the idea of keep it simple, finding more opportunities for creating moments that matter. Head over to theunwow.com and submit your email to stay on top of updates regarding The Unwow, your framework for experience designs of all kinds. Submit your email and become part of the Unwow community. Now, on to the show.
1, 2, 3.
Hi, I'm Gary David. Welcome to Experience by Design, the podcast where you explore experience designs of all kinds. Hello, experience designers and EXDers everywhere. Hope you're all doing well. As I've been working on my book, The Unwow, I've been talking to a lot, and I mean a lot of people in experience design and experience management about whether or not the idea for this book makes sense. Two things have emerged from these conversations. First, people generally are very supportive of the idea of the Unwow. It seems that people see a lot of opportunity in exploring more mundane aspects of everyday life for design opportunities. And by and large, those opportunities have been missed because people don't think about the mundane as worthy of designing for. So it's been great to hear that vote of confidence as I work on this project and build in their feedback into upcoming revisions of the manuscript. The second thing to emerge from these conversations is that on a certain level, none of this work should really be that hard. And by that, I mean, at its foundation, we as experienced designers ideally are trying to make life better for our design audiences. Whether it is users, customers, patients, employees, students, clients, or anybody else we're designing for in this experience design space, all we want to do is improve the experiences that people have. How we do that and the scale that it is done becomes the work of designers. But at the end of the day, it all comes down to a very simple point: doing the simple things, the basic things to make people's lives better. Nevertheless, what should be easy becomes more challenging when other organizational priorities take over. Organizations can become fixated on outcomes that may run counter to the goals of experienced designers. Thus, the frustration that many experienced designers, and maybe you count yourself in this category, feel when trying to do what is often more than a job, but a calling, being frustrated running into barriers that either minimize the scope of their work, reducing it to just collecting NPS, or completely block the work from happening altogether. To talk about the challenges and opportunities of experience design, I welcome Tamar Cohen to the Experience Design Studios. Like many people in experience design, Tamar had a very nonlinear path to her work. Starting out as an art history major, she worked in galleries and auction houses after graduating. She found herself at Citibank for 16 years, applying the skills she acquired from art history to her work in customer experience. She also shares her work leading other companies like Zoetis as the head of global customer experience strategy and at Travelers as VP of Employee Experience. And this connection of customer experience and employee experience is a major part of our conversation. We talk about this importance of connecting employee and customer experience, making your employees your first customers. We also talk about the importance of ethnographic research, a topic that's near and dear to my heart, to understand the full employee and customer journeys. We also discuss her new project with Michael Lowenstein, as well as her work with James Killian, who, just so happens, our former guest on Experience by Design. She describes what she calls the halo effect, which includes conducting qualitative research based on the 4 E's framework, which involves educate, empower, engage, and energize. Her company, Halo Effect, works by diagnosing the human system first, working with organizations and leadership to put people first. Again, simple idea that companies often struggle in executing. Overall, it was a great conversation about the importance of employee experience, how to lead with a people-first strategy, and how even a degree in art history can lay the foundation for better experience designs. Hope you enjoy it. I was kind of curious looking at your history, what exactly is involved in an improvisational exhibition for Day Without Art? In your LinkedIn, that jumped out at me more than anything else. I'm like, improvisational student-led Day Without Art thing. So what is that? What
that
goes
is
on?
A deep cut. You went deep on my LinkedIn. I didn't even realize it was still there. So my background, speaking of circuitous paths, actually is in art history. And
Right.
one of my first jobs at NYU was working at the Gray Art Gallery.
Okay.
And I was really fascinated by the Names Project quilt that
Right.
was, unfurled every year on the Washington Mall, with the names of people who've passed from AIDS. And what I wanted to do was sort of highlight the moment within the gallery. And so we just literally had like all these different colored pieces of paper, and we asked students to come in and just write their thoughts, people they lost, words of encouragement, support, whatever they wanted it to be. And the curator at the gallery was kind enough to give me sort of a small space, but a dedicated space. And we just filled the entire space, just piece by piece of paper. And so we sort of emulated the Names Project quilts with these pieces of paper and put that all around the room. And that was up for Day Without Art on December 1st. Yeah.
So when you're at NYU, you're obviously very smart to get into NYU. I could never get into NYU. And you go to your parents and say, guess what? I'm going to major in art history.
Okay. So as the daughter of two immigrants, that did not go over well.
And so why art history? Like, why that?
Oh my God. I never knew what I wanted to be when I grew up. I absolutely love history. Art was always and still is just something that affects me deeply. I really just have emotional connections to visual elements, not only visual art, but also dance. And that's something that I still do as a hobby, and other art forms. So when I went to my to my parents and said to them that this is the path that I'm taking, after a lot of animated conversations, let's just say, what my father did was interesting. He came to me and he said, "Okay, so Coca-Cola and Pepsi both have big art collections. JP Morgan has a big art collection.
Right.
You go work there." So that was the way that we found our way through. I promised him I would get some kind of like corporate curation.
Right.
Which of course never happened. I found my way there through other means, ironically.
Well, I get it, because when I went and told my mom I'm going to be a sociologist, she went, "What's that?" And the next thing was, I'm going to have a PhD and I'll teach. And then she just started telling her friends that I was going to school to become a doctor, which is technically true. But I'm glad no one ever came to me asking for medical advice. I would give it to them, but I just wouldn't know what I was talking about.
But uninformed, yeah.
Yeah, but uninformed. But this is kind of interesting to look at, that background. And I have a deep appreciation for the arts. I've studied art instructors and their work and how they teach students to see things, right? Because one of the, I don't know if you did, I know you did art as well, but the idea that the things that we often miss are those things right in front of us, and how our brain misprocesses information in ways that kind of fit into these cultural these cultural constructs or schemas, but we miss the details.
Well, that's what I find so fascinating. And I sort of don't get a chance to talk about this enough. So thank you for allowing me the opportunity. When you're studying art history, you generally are not just looking at an artwork and you just need to know, the name of the painting, the artist, and the date. You need to know the context. You need to understand the historical background. You need to understand the personality of the artist in the context of the historical moment to understand what makes this piece of art particularly unique. Additionally, you're looking at all of the different elements within the painting. So it could be this huge, broad landscape, but you need to understand how the painting of the leaves are done in comparison to something else. Is it oil? Is it acrylic? Are you seeing the paint, the brush strokes? So you're really looking at truly the forest for the trees. Like you are absolutely looking at absolutely every single detail and then piecing it back together and then putting it in this larger context of how did the artist get here? What are the sociological and historical elements that brought them to this particular place? And so while, yes, at the time with my parents, it was a challenge to get them to understand. When I look back, it is absolutely the foundation for how I've structured almost everything else, even without realizing it.
You say they're immigrants. Where did they immigrate from?
So my father was born in Morocco, raised in Israel. My mother is Australian.
Okay. So, I mean, actually my daughter was just in Morocco because she's studying abroad and she traveled there for a weekend. The cultural preservation, maybe not so much with Australia, but for sure with Morocco and for sure with Israel, is important, right? I mean, you're studying art history, a significant element of, whether it be, Moroccan culture, Arab culture, Jewish culture, Israeli culture, whatever, is art, is expression of culture through art, and whatever form it is. And so that had to be something, for your father to be like, yeah, that's cool. You're touching base with something that is vital to who we are as a people.
Oh, absolutely. And by the way, when it comes to Australia, the whole realm of Aboriginal art.
Oh, that's for that. Sure. That's true.
Opens up this, massive amount of, indigenous culture and place and connection to land. There's such Aboriginal art is some of the most fascinating, especially the dreamscapes. I don't know if you're familiar. They're absolutely stunning, and what they really reveal about individual tribes and groups is phenomenal. But yes, it is ultimately all about that connection, but always, always back to history and place. That is always the underlying theme.
But parents being parents, they want to make sure that you have jobs, we have jobs when we graduate so that they can get rid of us and not have to pay for us for a longer period of time.
Right. That's right. The sooner the better.
And just one real quick question about that was when you became VP of the Art History Club, was that hotly contested? Do you remember that campaign?
These are like depths of my memory. Well, I lost the presidency to the grandson of Juan Moreau.
Okay.
So the presidency was contested. I was never going to win that battle because, Tamar Cohen from Queens, New York was not going to...
I would have voted for you.
I appreciate that. But yeah, no, I don't remember the contest. I just remember losing to him.
Yeah, well, I remember one time I was asked to run to be president of a sociological association with the express purpose of losing. They're like, look, we need someone to run against so-and-so. We want her to win, but we can't have a blank ticket. Would you mind running against her and losing? I'm like, yeah, I can do that. I said, I can guarantee I will lose. They're like, great, that you're our man. So I was recruited once not to run and win, but to run and lose.
That's funny. No, I ran to win.
Good for you.
My consolation prize is, and look, I can say that I worked with the grandson of Juan Moreau, which is not that bad of a prize, honestly.
That ain't nothing. I mean, so how do you go from art history at NYU and then go into banking? Because that seems like, I'm like, all right, I do understand it, but I'm curious if there's a larger story into that movement from art history, banking.
Well, there was about 100 left turns before I went into banking. But the primary was after trying my hand at, working at a bunch of different galleries. I did an internship in Sotheby's in Tel Aviv. I did some time at the MoMA. Yeah, I wanted to eat. I wanted food. I wanted to move out of my parents' house. And growing up in New York, you need money. You need a decent amount of money. And so I took a job in public relations, actually, and I became a account manager for a small PR company, a boutique company and I specialized in the cause-related marketing area. So we did a lot of work for the Avon's breast cancer crusade. We did Liz Claiborne's domestic violence campaign, and what seems almost small in comparison is the Sewing Association's Heart Healthy program,
Right.
Where we were trying to promote sewing as a tool for people that had, high blood pressure, prone to heart attacks, things like that. So that was kind of left turn number one. Left turn number two that came after that sort of was in my time when I was trying to save money to travel the world. So what I wanted to do was to temp, save money, and then travel. So what I was doing was I was working with a temp firm and going out on calls anywhere and everywhere so that I could save money. And I went to, all around the Middle East. I went to Thailand and Vietnam. I went to India. I went, I traveled really anywhere my little legs would take me. But over that time, through temping, I started getting regular clients that happened to be like at, I'm trying to remember what they used to be called. I want to say Dwayne Reed, and that's not it. But Dylan, I don't remember, but what's now UBS, and a few other banking companies. And I just learned on the job how to be a business analyst. And when I came back from all of my travel, I already had about a year and a half of experience under my belt, was able to get a job as a business analyst, and was able to leverage a lot of my writing skills, a lot of my analytics skills that I developed through, my art history work. And I enjoyed it, being
Right.
able to work with people to understand, okay, here are the systems that you're looking to build. What do you do? How do you do it? What are the needs on an ongoing basis? When you look, a year ahead, what do you need to be doing versus what you're doing now? And then working with them to design these systems, it became a really interesting transition that I felt was using still a lot of my honed skills up until that point.
My school, you might be interested in hearing this, but my school is actually exploring creating basically a new program in arts administration, arts management.
That's what I studied. And honestly,
Yeah.
I like I said before, I really do think it's the baseline for absolutely everything I've done since. I don't think it was ever made explicit, but I think it can be and should be. And
Well, we don't have a fine arts program, but Brandeis does. And Brandeis is about 4 miles from my campus.
Okay.
So we might collaborate with Brandeis around creating this arts management, arts administration, not quite formulated in a label yet, but something where we can work together with our business knowledge and curriculum with their fine arts knowledge and curriculum.
Yeah. Well, if you want somebody to help kind of like articulate that bridge,
I will let you know, because
give me a call.
that definitely needs to be articulated. So like, this is why I ask those questions, right? Because I find that, the foundation of your work, and I want to get into some of the other stuff is, I often find there's a thread, right? Even though it seems like 1,000 left turns or 100 left turns, there's still a thread, and there's still a foundation of you in everything that you do. And going from, art into banking, for sure, wanting to eat, but also what can you bring to that work that is still rooted in your experiences and your perspectives and what you value as being important.
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly it. I mean, yes, the key motivator at the time was, how can I make money and survive? But the truth is that I really did enjoy the work, and especially starting as a temp kind of allows you that opportunity to say, like, okay, I'm not giving up on my dreams, right? And then you sort of find yourself enjoying it, getting good at it, being requested to come back. You're building the confidence, and it becomes almost like this step ladder to a point where you say, okay, you know what, now let me take my next move. And that's how I actually, was able to move into the real foundation of my career, which was starting at Goldman Sachs and then into Citibank. And, that's where it all kind of went from there.
And, one of the things I wanted to ask you about in your experiences was, I'm going to get the name wrong, Zoetis. Is that how you say the name, Zoetis?
Yeah. That's
Yeah,
right.
because I didn't know what that was. And I see it's an animal health company. And number one, I'm interested if you can hook me up with a cheap price on Zycortal, because it costs me $300 a month to give my dog a shot because he has Addison's disease. But we can talk about that afterwards.
Yes.
But, the health space, you want, this cause. I mean, pets are family in many instances. Sometimes they're product, but often their family. And so I see it as, this cause related marketing, you still working in causes, right? That even at Zoetis, you're being the global customer experience, head of global customer experience strategy, but not a bank, right? But an animal company, animal health company. How did that happen?
So there was definitely a point where, having worked at Citibank for about 16 years, what kept me there so long was the opportunity to do some pretty groundbreaking work where we were really analyzing how customers think about finances, how their behavior drives their decisions. And it was this opportunity to really build products based on true user behavior. However, at the end of the day, after 16 years at Citibank, I found myself sort of wanting that values, mission-oriented kind of role. I found Zoetis, and I did tell my boss, who became the CEO actually, on my first interview, I don't eat red meat and I don't have a pet, so I don't know if I'm your girl.
Right.
And she said, we just need somebody who knows, the customer experience space. So moving into that role was really interesting. CX very often, and I'm sure you know this well, is usually born out of a near-death experience, right? Something bad happens and there's this panic to say, oh my God, we weren't ready. Our customers are pissed at us and we don't know what to do next. And so it was this opportunity to come in after they had a bit of a situation with a new product that they released that, surpassed all their expectations. It was an absolute blockbuster. And so I was able to come in to this new industry, work with veterinarians, work with food producers, really get into that business of animal health. And I can't even tell you, Gary, the passion and the love and the dedication of almost everyone I met in that industry was just astounding. Honestly, that was probably some of the best 4 years that I spent, because it was a hell of a learning experience, just a completely new space for me. I got to work with doctors and specialists and food scientists and beef specialists and, genetics that really shaped what it means to kind of lead with personal values in an industry.
And it makes me think about how complicated an ecosystem can be and who's the customer, because you just listed off about 10 of them, right?
Yeah.
In terms of a stakeholder map. I mean, if we were creating a stakeholder map or an ecosystem map, ultimately the customer, quote unquote, might be the animal. Right.
Oh.
Because that's that's the thing that's receiving the medicine. But in that ecosystem, there's all these other things happening and going on. And so when you're sitting there doing global customer experience strategy, how do you even define who the customer is, and how do you approach that category or that group?
So we had to really break it down. It is funny when I think back. I mean, it was funny at the time too. I worked with the head of poultry, the head of pet care, the head of large cattle, right? So these business units were just sort of interesting. Our primary customers ultimately were the veterinarians and the food producers. Mm-hmm. They were the ones that needed to understand and feel comfortable with each medicine, with each test, with each diagnostic. They needed to put their own reputation on the line every time they recommended or administered the product. So that was our primary customer, who we designated as our primary customer. We also we were primarily B2B, but we also had a B2B2C model where we also supported pet owners who would call with questions about a particular product. If there was a adverse reaction, if there was a particular situation, we had a staff of veterinarians that worked with our call center teams. And so we did sort of that B2B to C side as well. So we did quite a bit of work as well, kind of understanding the pet owners, understanding the pet business. And then on the food production side, it does become interesting. Now we consider them more like secondary and tertiary, but you do need to work with the food scientists. You do need to work with I'm sort of forgetting the technical name, but I keep saying beef specialist, but there is a more technical term that I'm actually blanking on right now. Because there is a science to understanding not just the medications they're receiving, but how they eat, what is the weather conditions, what is the state of the alkaline levels of the water that they're being given, right? There's all of these different elements, and they need to be supported as well. But we had to start somewhere. And so we just took kind of our primary two audiences and we worked from there.
I one time got the chance to do a consulting project in a call center of a dental lab, a very large dental lab. And I knew nothing what was being talked about on the phones in terms of the content, but it allowed me to look at a higher level at some of the overall things that were happening. You know what I mean? So I can imagine you going in, not knowing stuff allowed you to have a different perspective or ability to examine details that other people might have missed who knew what was going on intimately and they were focusing on the science of it, but you're coming in not knowing the science of it going, okay, that's cool. You know the science, but have you thought about this more fundamental thing?
Well, I think what was interesting, probably the biggest extraction that I took out of the whole thing was how much commonality there was in the concerns, in the situations. I was told from the beginning, these guys are, everything is very different. There's no alignment. There's no, and I actually remember producing a report once that basically said, all right, here are the key questions that keep coming up across all groups. It was kind of one of those stacked reports. So when we looked at sort of common issues, it was like a 60% overlap of, commonality that we were able to find. So it's like, all right, well, we're not as different as we thought. So here are things that we can do en masse and think about how to address these. Yes, these are more specialized. We'll address those later. And that was fascinating. And actually, a learning for almost everybody, because I think you start getting kind of caught up into your individual silos and taking that moment to lift your head up and look back around was an important moment.
Was this the first time they had a head of global customer experience strategy? I would imagine you probably were the first one.
That was the first one. Yeah. So I came in and had to do a couple of things all at the same time. I hate the phrase building the plane while you fly it, but I think it absolutely applies here. So I came in day one. I was responsible for building a customer experience platform, connecting it to the digital strategy. So I own the US digital strategy and building a loyalty program as well.
Wow.
So this was building out the functional elements, right? So how do we do our listening? How do we think about journeys? How do we collect the data? How do we build the measurements and the metrics? But then there was also a whole cultural element. So as somebody actually said to me, and this was a verbatim quote, little lady, you're just a girl from New York City. What do you know about this business?
Oh, I see.
And honestly, he was right. I mean, but he was right. What the hell did I know? But their point was customer experience in their minds was about relationships. And most sales reps and leaders in this space have not just partial relationships. These guys go to T-ball. Their kids go to T-ball leagues together. They coach, they go to the same churches. They see each other at, local restaurants. They are enmeshed in each other's communities. And so what is a customer experience leader going to tell me about my customer that I don't already know? So we had a massive cultural engagement that we needed to do to basically say, this isn't about telling you what you're doing wrong or not doing wrong. This is about to give you more information and maybe a deeper understanding of other meta market issues that they might be facing, or getting to the heart of challenges that maybe they're not raising because they see you all the time. They don't want to give you some of the more negative news. This is our ability to get it more anonymously, and we can give you more insight so that you can actually deliver a better service. That took a long time. And so we had to do a pretty steady drumbeat that included a whole marketing campaign, an internal marketing campaign. We did an entire training around it. We delivered tons of town halls. We built a whole advocacy program internally, did a whole rewards and recognition around it. So that definitely took a while.
Yeah, it's people do understandably get sensitive. I get sensitive when I perceive someone coming in and telling me how to do my job. And one of the things I've discovered, I'd be curious at your thoughts as you shifted into employee experience. Not that I'm telling you what you're not doing, but I'm trying to help you do what you're already doing better.
Right.
And so I'm here, I do get the sense, and this is one of my frustrations with only talking about one part of the ecosystem. So when we talk about student experience, well, guess what? Teachers feel like they're getting more work with less support. Yeah. What about my experience? And so then we start talking about not just, student experience or educator experience, but learning experiences. So how can we raise all the boats at the same time? And how can we help you do your job better that you're already doing well? And so is this a constant thing that you see of, not fixing, but assisting and helping, even when you might be in actuality fixing?
Yeah. Well, a lot of times you are fixing.
Right.
Look, I think at the end of the day, the way that I tried to position customer experience is think of us as the gnomes in the background that are giving you the information to help you do your job better. This was obviously before AI, but, like I would position it now, like we're giving you that additional insight so that you can do a better job at servicing your clients. It was a lot of work to position ourselves, not as we're going to tell you how to do your job, but rather we're going to help make sure that you're getting exactly what you need when you need it. And your point around the student versus teacher and the learning experience, it goes exactly to sort of this challenge that I've seen from the beginning, which is when a leader is brought into focus only on customer experience, it's never going to work thoroughly. It's never going to work completely because you need that employee piece as well. That employee and customer connection has to go hand in hand. I had a lot of situations where we did a lot of work, building out a particular journey. And because employees, either I wasn't able to get people to the table or I had other leaders kind of blocking access, the biggest failures were always when we didn't have employees at the table giving us that layer of information to help us understand what is the employee experience and why this program that we're about to implement may or may not work. I had one journey that completely blew up because we just did not have that level of insight that was essential to make sure that this program was going to work. So we had to stop our journey. We then did a full employee journey that we called Day in the Life. So we actually went on the road with a number of different reps to understand. And we got so much insight even just from that, so we started realizing, okay, well, we can't get real-time data because these guys have 2 or 3 hours between farms that they're going to. And by the way, there's no broadband, so they have to pull, we're asking them basically to pull over into, gas stations and God knows what. It didn't work. It did not work. And it wasn't until I was sitting, like in one case, I was in Hersford, Texas, driving between feedlots and sort of saying to myself, like, my God, of course, this journey was doomed to fail. This is absurd.
Right.
And we had to restructure the whole thing. You need that EX, you need that CX. And then in the middle kind of comes that whole work experience. Are we actually designing an organization that makes it efficient to be able to allow both to grow?
I love that story. And I'm going to share with my students because it's not just getting quote unquote insights of employees. You didn't just give out a survey, because the things that you were finding in doing your field-based studies, which is something I teach, is you would never get from a survey necessarily.
You can't.
It's not a shot. And so, one of the things I'm trained in is workplace studies. And so you got to be at the place where it's happening and be able to understand the process of work, not just from a technical aspect, from a cultural, a social, a psychological, all the elements in this context, you got to understand, because work is more than just doing the work.
That's right.
It's who people are.
That's right. And especially in this day and age, when you talk about these concepts of efficiency, right? And headcount is being cut in the name of AI efficiency. More often than not, you don't need AI to come in to manage efficiency. I mean, again, I think about every call center that I ever worked with, and they easily had between 5 and 20 different systems that they would have to go into on a regular basis, cutting and pasting and moving data, entering it, duplicate data entry in multiple places. Some of the most inefficient systems ever.
Right.
Now, from a metrics perspective, they're hitting their numbers. So why would anyone really take a look? From the employee experience itself, on a survey perspective, they're getting their work done and, getting done what they need to do. So, that's not necessarily going to come up, but it's when you're sitting there next to somebody and you're watching these screens go back and forth. And I don't know how many times I said to somebody, how do you remember? And they would just look at me and say, you keep making mistakes until you figure it out.
Right.
And that's not efficiency.
People I know who are academics are going to listen to your stories and they might pass out from jealousy, because the level of access you have in terms of doing these field-based studies of work, which again is what I'm trained in, it's unbelievable, because I have had the opportunity to do some of those detailed studies of work, but they can be hard to come by. And I'm imagining like when you were the global head or head of global customer experience, you had that access. Do you find now, working with companies through Halo Effect, that they're willing to give you that access? They're willing to pay for that level of access, because it's really rich what you're finding, and it's hugely beneficial and impactful. But when folks are just used to, well, give me the employee, score. Yeah. It can make it hard. It can make it a hard sell when they don't understand the vital importance of that kind of quote unquote qualitative data.
Yeah. Well, before we even get into any kind of MSA, when I'm writing up the proposal, section 1 is always, the quantitative, sure. But then the qualitative, I am going to go into your offices and I'm going to interview leaders and I'm going to interview managers and I'm going to interview employees. And I have as well an assessment that I send out to leaders and to employees, asking them to gauge importance and accurateness of the statement around these 4 themes that I've developed as part of employee experience, which is education, empowerment, engagement, and energy. So these are the 4 E's that we talk about at Halo Effect. So we have several questions against each of those themes. We ask leaders, talk to us a little bit about the level of ongoing development, ongoing learning opportunities. Talk to us about levels of accountability and ownership in a particular department. On the engagement side, do people feel connected to the work? Do they feel dedicated to the mission? And then are people bringing that level of energy? Are you seeing a lot of mistakes? Are you seeing a lot of people staying home? Are you seeing a lot of retention concerns? When we present that to both leaders and to employees, and then we show the top line results, the response always is, oh my God, because the difference in importance and accuracy is always night and day. And that's how you show that you've got a problem. It also allows us, by the way, to prioritize, because in some cases, the challenges, may not be what leaders sort of thought it was. Like, actually, you guys are quite well aligned, but we got to focus here where you think you've got a fantastic learning program and employees feel like they can't upskill, reskill. They're worried about their jobs as a result. And you're seeing that loss of energy. So having that level of access is essential. And one of the key things, and if they're not going to move forward with us, even just like from the proposal, they know that right up front.
Yeah. And if they aren't willing to do that level of investigation and realization, it's probably going to be a dead end anyway, honestly. I mean, a lot of people say they want to, like, we want to change. I'm like, do you? I mean, a lot of people in therapy don't change because like the idea of it, but the work of it is actually, it takes a lot. And there might be things that you discover that you don't want to know, but once you know about them, now you got to deal with them. And that's the hard work.
Well, I mean, exposure is always scary. But if you're giving me a call and you want to spend some money, I want to make sure you're getting value for that money. And this is how I think you will gain the most value. Let's unearth what matters and why it matters, and then we'll build a plan around fixing it.
So why the career shift in title around customer experience to employee experience? I mean, how did that take place when you went from one job title to explicitly another job title?
So one of the things that I realized at Zoetis as the head of CX was, again, that criticality of integrating with employee experience, as we talked about before. When I was approached by travelers, I was approached by the executive head of customer experience, of experience management, I should say, sorry. And he offered me a position as head of employee experience. And it was really interesting to me for two reasons. First of all, this would be really working directly with the experience management lead to be able to do exactly what I wanted to do, which is how do we make sure that CX can succeed and drive the change that is promised by ensuring that we have the right employee experiences and baselines in place. Secondly, it was an opportunity to start something again from the ground up. So the job didn't exist before, and I had the ability to come in and, again, same thing, build out the operations, build out the functional aspects, design the metrics, and again, a whole cultural reframing, because there was a very strong sense of culture and in insurance, risk avoidance runs pretty deep, and fair enough. That's what they're in the business of. And so again, this was a matter of we're not here to change the house. We want to make sure that we just have the right foundations to make sure that we are optimizing the organization to continue to work as you have been and to exceed. Now, I came in March 2021. So I came in right at the precipice of the whole return to office timeframe. So it was really kind of having a front row seat to some of the biggest workplace changes. And so we were able to really lean in quickly on that culture side. I think it was less of a fight than it might have been otherwise, because how do you handle the resistance, the change, the exhaustion, the trust issues that was just caused by everything happening in COVID? People were still terrified, health concerns, family concerns, isolation. And we ran a couple of pretty extensive emotional studies, which at first were sort of disregarded. But what we started to show was understanding this now can help us drive how we communicate, how we engage. So, as we're starting to do our calls for return to office, here are the words that tend to trigger people, get them worried. Here are the words that tend to create more of that sense of trust and security. And so we were able to help move the organization based on that work. And then over time, as we built the overall employee experience function, had people understand that this is not just about the feel-good work, right? This was really about understanding the true experiences. And that's another component that I think also has to constantly be reiterated. This isn't employee engagement is how you feel, but employee experience is the sum total of everything that you go through from the time that you start applying for a job to the time that you leave. And sometimes even as an alumni. Right. So every time your badge swipe doesn't work, every time your password reset takes 3 days, when you onboard, how long does it take to get your laptop? Is it too cold or too warm in an office? Are your teams, is there a psychological safety within your teams? Is your manager toxic? Do you love the mission and the leadership, right? So all of these aspects, from the seemingly minute to these much more kind of existential questions, all have an impact. And so we were able to build a framework around how all of that comes together. We use the same metrics that were used in customer experience. So we brought in ENPS so that there was, again, familiarity with what these numbers represent and what they mean. We were able to, over time, connect them to hard numbers like turnover, retention, top performers. We were able to articulate as well, predictive scenarios. Managers that come into this kind of team tend to stay longer. To this kind of team, they leave within 18 months. So we were able to start getting a lot of that analysis that moved from that, are we all happy here, to why do these numbers matter? Why is this insight important? And what do we do about it?
Makes me think about, you say, start from the ground up. What's that, when you're going to work that first day, it's like, okay, so I got my office, I walk in, okay, I gone through all the HR paperwork. Like, now what?
Yeah. There's always that feeling of like opening up that blank sheet of paper and then like wanting to cry. It's like, I don't know. Or that
blank canvas.
Blank canvas, whatever it is. But no, I mean, ultimately, it starts with conversations. The first thing I do always, and this goes back to what you were talking about before, that deep field research, is I start sort of a listening tour and then follow that up with a deeper assessment. So just start with, who can I talk to? I talk to you. Can you refer me to 3 people that you think would be good to have a conversation with? Go to them. And then you start building up a more formal assessment, because now I can build out some hypotheses and some trends that I'm seeing, build out the assessment. So now I can start to dig into how this actually manifests across different kinds of groups, different teams, different business lines, and the like.
So did you ever have as your program classes in research methods?
No.
Yeah, because I'm like, as you're describing, like, oh, she's using an inductive approach, multi-methodological, framework. I'm like, all the things that we talk about in class, I hear you describing.
Yeah.
And it's just so impressive that you've been able to like kind of piece all this together. It's not rocket science, but it is impressive that you're piecing it all together without ever having formally learned how to do it.
Well, I appreciate that. I would sound so much smarter if I was able to say half of the words that you just used. But I mean, it's just over time. I think there's sort of, if I had to define myself just in general, I'm definitely very scrappy and I'm very resilient. Right. So kind of what I lack in maybe like more formal academic training, I do figure out. I ask a lot of questions. I'm not really afraid to look stupid. I'd rather not look stupid, but, I kind of recognize that in order to get to where I'm going, sometimes you just have to stop and ask, can somebody just direct me here? And over time, just figured it out.
Well, I would expect a little lady from Queens who's the daughter of immigrants to be scrappy. I think if you say those words together, scrappy is definitely one of the adjectives that's implied in that description.
Yeah, especially from Queens. So how then does halo effect take place? How does that take shape? And, it does seem like it's, one more example of you being in a kind of cause-related industry, kind of like leading a cause. Yeah. So definitely a career bucket list, something that I've always wanted to do. The entrepreneurial aspect of it kind of came to light when I realized, after being at Zoetis and starting this thing from the ground up, and then going to Travelers and starting this thing from the ground up, I realized how much I love starting things from the ground up. That sort of tear that rolls down your face, on day one with a white sheet of paper. At the end of the day, that thrill is something that I do enjoy. And so I had the opportunity to start. I started with a partner at the time. We had a client that had reached out to us and had some pretty urgent needs around onboarding. They were losing, I think, over 75% of all their new hires within the first 6 months. Yeah, I mean, they were absolutely bleeding. And so we were able to kind of leap right in, take all of these skills and do exactly kind of everything we've been talking about, and jump right in. So it was such a fantastic opportunity to take all of these learnings and all of these insights and the connection between customer and employee experience, which is so near and dear to my heart, is something now I can bring to clients and allow them to recognize that we can't just talk about these things in isolation, because I'll get calls, hey, we need to do a customer journey and we need to achieve, XYZ results, or we've got a significant retention issue and we need you to give us a hand. And in each time I can take a step back and say, okay, well, what are your ultimate the outcomes? What are your corporate outcomes? What are your customer outcomes? Now let's go into internally. What do we need to change in order to get there? So building that connection, and it's almost always an argument. It's almost always, well, it doesn't really matter. Like, because we really need to fix this. Okay. So to fix this, what needs to happen? Again, at some point, somebody says, well, we need the teams to do X, Y, and Z. Okay. So yes, we do need to start inside. So that's been, that's the moment I love. I love when that light bulb comes on, bringing people to the table and then getting there and starting that work.
Yeah. And in a weird way, I wonder, as I listen to you talk, that, being in art, I apologize for keep going back to the art stuff, but I find it fascinating because if you're in an environment of an art crit of some kind, where someone's showing their work or people are doing their interpretations of an artistic piece, you might be very firm in your idea of what it means or what it represents or the significance of it, but yet you have to be able to listen to other people with their viewpoints. And I mean, looking at data is very similar, right? Especially in these kinds of environments where someone already has a very firm idea of what it is they think. No, we got to fix this. And you're like, yeah, but let's also look at it this way. And to create this open environment of almost like a data crit, lack of a better word.
Interesting.
Of kind of looking at it from different perspectives and understanding that we can all have different perspectives and we need to be able to listen to each other to have a more comprehensive overall appreciation of whatever it is we're looking at.
Yeah, that's a really interesting perspective. And what you were just saying also is, the criticism against art critics is that, they get to sort of sit on the sidelines and judge, right? They don't actually kind of get in there. They don't understand what it means to actually be in that creative moment and have that inspiration and develop, right? They get to sort of just look at the end state and make a judgment. And it is very similar to that, and that's what I'm trying to bridge, right? Like, how can you understand the mindset of artist, art critic, final product, objectively? Right. And it's hard. It's always very hard. It's not an easy thing to do, but, to get that full picture, if we're going to bring it back to art again, right? To take sort of those elements of looking at the leaves and the fruit plate and the dress, what does that actually mean in the context of the larger picture that you're trying to create?
And you have coming up, you're going to give a talk with James Killian, who was just on this show recently. And so can you talk a little bit about what you're doing at that event and how you came to work with James? Yeah.
So James and I met sort of, I guess, through the CX circuit. We just through connections. And our very first conversation ever ended up being a 45-minute conversation where we realized we need to turn this into a white paper because we were talking about all of these theories of CX and EX and the intersection and the future of work, most specifically. And so we did that. We wrote a white paper and turned that into an article, which we anticipate will be published very soon, and hopefully it will be soon. And we were able to then leverage that into a workshop that we're leading at WorkHuman.
That's great.
And so the focus of that is about the 5 pillars of work experience. So when you sort of think about employee experience, customer experience, and the future of work, what actually needs to evolve in order to be successful in this new era? So, we talk about these 5 pillars. Pillar 1 is understanding microcultures, right? Aligned to macro. So making sure that teams aren't running off in their own sort of elements of toxicity, that everything is aligned, that there's clear accountability, systems alignment. So making sure that, as you're bringing in consultants or even AI agents, we understand exactly how all of these different systems align together so that the data is always flowing seamlessly. creating a asynchronous way of collaboration. So moving away from this very highly traditional way of, requiring everyone around a table physically, understanding that we're in this very kind of distributed space, again, including AI agents. And what does that mean? And then how do we think about onboarding and integration of all of that? So these are the 5 elements that we're going to be talking about.
I can see why you worked well together, James, coming from an IO psych background, and you having more of this anthropological, sociological, for lack of a better word.
Yes.
I mean, that's kind of what it is. It's art, but art is culture, right? And looking at this bigger context, not that James couldn't do that. Sorry, James, but
he absolutely does.
You're able to kind of bring these things together because once again, as you're describing all this, I'm like, that is very sociological.
Yeah.
And it's very social psychological, right? And I think that's what at the foundation, as you demonstrated with your own educational relevance, all this stuff does come back around to understanding people in context.
Always.
Whether it's a workplace, whether it's a work activity, whether it's the work team, whether it's a customer, whether it's a product, it's creation of things that interact with people in context, which goes back to the fundamentals of experience design.
That's right.
And how people perceive those things and how people react to those things and how these things can have a life of their own and how do we understand them? So all of that is, again, very much in this kind of, it's interesting that you couldn't have told your parents at the time,
if only
where this is going to end up. But it's like, oh yeah, this actually has relevance to everything. No matter what I do, it will have relevance in a fundamental way because it's foundational.
Yeah, I would never have believed it, honestly. If somebody showed me a crystal ball 20 years before, I would never have believed it.
Where would you have thought you would have ended up today back then?
Oh, running my own gallery.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought that's where I was going to end up.
I know people who do. It seems difficult. You got to deal with difficult artists and artist statements and their work being displayed. And did you sell it? And why didn't you sell it? And then you got customers. I have a friend who owns a gallery in Rockport.
Okay.
Yeah. And he's retired and he was an art instructor and all the things, an artist himself. But he's just like, he likes doing it as a retirement thing.
Yeah.
But as a full-time thing, it seems it's more dealing with customer and employees who've been doing the same thing.
I didn't want to lose my passion for the artwork itself. So this was for the best.
It's a good thing it's a hobby.
It's a good thing it's a hobby. Exactly. Yeah.
And so you still do the art? Either do your art, you say you dance, you do visual arts. Was that your medium? Was visual arts? Was it painting, sculpting?
So I did dance. That was mine. And I actually only stopped about a year ago. Just needed a bit of a break. But no, I'm in New York City. So, I've got the MoMA like 3 avenues away from me. I've got, the Met nearby. I was just at the Frick. They reopened that whole space recently and was down in Soho a couple of weeks ago, just going in and out of the different galleries. So yeah, I'm in it.
So I know people who went to Pratt, and whenever you're talking about Pratt and you want to describe an artist, you just go, they went to Pratt, and everyone goes, oh yeah, okay.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know what it means, but to them it means something for sure. Like, oh, sure, Pratt.
Yeah, NYU, SVA, Pratt. There's connotations.
Yeah, so it's. I really appreciate, as a person who, sociologist who's a workplace ethnographer, I really appreciate all the ethnographic importance that you bring to your work and also the voice of the employee and the voice of the customer in an authentic sense, and that you can't have one without the other and you got to combine them both if you want to do the best kind of work. It's just fascinating stuff.
I love it. I love this work. I really, really do.
And so if you had to think of a best case scenario 10 years from now, what would we be seeing in this kind of linkage between employee experience, customer experience, and organizations?
Well, I'm really working on sort of what the future workplace looks like. So in the space of AI agents, employees, and consultants, there was an Upwork study that said, I think in the next 2 or 3 years, over 50% of the workforce is going to be consultants or fractional. And these 5 pillars that I mentioned before, those are going to absolutely drive how we work together. The idea of decision-making, collaboration, all of that changes. And so in 10 years from now, I'm hoping that my work is helping to lead that path.
Well, I think it's going to, because I've read the white paper that you and Michael Lowenstein friend wrote, and I know James, and talking with you, and all the work you've done, I have no doubt that you're going to be able to push that message forward because they're scrappy.
We're scrappy. That's right. All of us, yes.
Yeah, you got to be scrappy in this business, in this racket,
You gotta be
because
scrappy.
it's
That's right.
telling people things that should be going back. It's right in front of you. It should
That's
be
right.
obvious, but yet we have to make the obvious visible because it's become invisible for reasons. And so like any good art teacher, how do I get you to see what's right in front of you?
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
Well, thank you so much, Tamar. It's been great talking with you.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Gary.
I want to thank Tamar Cohen for joining me to talk about art history, employee experience, leading with a people-first strategy, and pleasing our parents, which I think we can all identify with. You can find out more about her work in the links in the show notes. And as always, you can share feedback on this episode or any episode at feedback@experiencexdesign.com. Thank you for those who have shared the feedback. And if you haven't, I do want to hear from you. And if you want to stay on top of the Unwow news, and you know you do, you can head over to theunwell.com and provide your email. That's theunwow.com. Give me your email, and I'll make sure to let you know about all the events and happenings that are going on around the Unwow. And you can also bring the Unwow straight to your organization by working with me in the capacity of professional development, keynote, training, or anything else. I even like to do brown bag lunches. So if you want to hear more about the Unwow in your organization and learn how to bring the mundane into better relief and perspective, make sure you contact me, Gary David, at gary@garyconnects.com, or DM me through LinkedIn. And with that, as always, be safe, be kind, be well, and be here for the next Experience by Design. Bye.